Hello everyone, I hope you guys are doing well. I am your friend Manish and today we are going to continue our discussion on prototypal inheritance. In the last session, we discussed how we can achieve the prototypal inheritance using __ proto property. And in today's session, we will discuss how we can achieve the same using F.prototype, which is function.prototype. So as part of this video, we will first understand the concept, then we will jump into the code, and at the last we will practice some challenges, problems or some questions. So without any further delay, let's get started. So what is prototype on functions? So prototype is a regular property on functions which is either null or it points to the another object. So prototype is the name of the property on the functions, right? It's just a regular property name, nothing special about it. Like we have properties on the object and we can name it name, age, first name, last name, right? So here prototype is just a regular property name. It's just that it has some special powers with it, right? So prototype is just a property name on the functions which can either point to null or it can point to a other object. So as you can see here in the diagram as well, so it's our function, right? And it has a prototype property which is pointing to another object. That object can be anything, any valid JavaScript object. So as per the definition, please remember it that prototype on the functions is just a property which can be either null or it can point to the another valid JavaScript object. Make sense? Let's move further. Now let's understand how it is different from the term prototype. In the last session, we discussed the terminology or the term prototype, right? How it is different from that. So we discussed in last session that this prototype term is actually referring to the property P capital prototype in double square brackets. So it's a special property on the objects, right? It's a special property on the object which points to the upper hierarchy or the prototypal chain, right? So which this property can also be either null or it can have a reference to the another object. So here prototype means a terminology or a term which has a definition that every object has a special hidden property named this, right? So that points to the terminology on the objects, and here it's a regular property name. It's not a terminology or any definition. It's here it means that functions has a special property named prototype, which again also refers to either null or it has a reference to another object. I hope the difference is clear. Here F.prototype means it's just a special property with special powers, and here prototype means it's a terminology or definition which states that every object has a special hidden property named this, which is either null or it points to the another object which creates the prototypal chain or which creates the prototypal hierarchy. So this prototype means a vertical arrow where child points to the parent, and here prototype means a horizontal arrow which means functions has a property which points to the another object. So you can, whenever you find these two terms, have this picture in your mind. When it's a function.prototype means it's a regular property, just regular property which points to the another object, and here the term prototype means a vertical arrow means it has a parent child relationship or there is a prototypal chain where child points to its parent, so that we can find the property in its upper hierarchy. Cool. I hope we are clear till here. Let's move next. Okay. In the last session, we discussed that it doesn't matter how we create the object using object literal or the constructor function or the object.create. Every object has a pointer to the default object, which is object.prototype, which has some special methods defined on it. So that is why we are able to call toString or has on property, because those methods exist in the prototypal hierarchy of any object. Similarly, when we create a function, every function has a default prototype. So if we are not assigning the prototype to any other object, then every function has a default prototype which has just a single property, and the name of the property is constructor, right? Makes sense? Let me revise it. Whenever we create a new function, right, then by default its prototype, the prototype property of the function, points to the object. It points to the object which has just a single property, and the name of the property is constructor, which points back to the function itself. So basically we can see that there is a function on the left and there is an object on the right, and function has a property named prototype, and that object has a property named constructor. Make sense? And by default this prototype points to that object, and that object's constructor property points back to the function itself. So there is a two-way communication between that. So if we are not assigning function's prototype to any other object, then by default there is a fallback object, or there is a object which has just one property named constructor, which points back to that function itself. I hope this makes sense. If not, pause the video here, have a look at the screen, this slide, and then we will move forward. Cool. Now see how we can use this F.prototype property to create the prototypal inheritance in JavaScript. First, let's compare it with __proto property. So in the last session, we discussed that to set up the prototypal chain with __proto property, we use it this way. There is a child object dot __proto __ is equal to parent, which means it will set this parent as a parent of the child object, or it will set up the prototypal chain between these two objects. So child will become the lower end of the prototypal chain, which means child inherits from the parent. So in this case, JavaScript will first try to find property, any property from child, and if does not find, it will follow this prototypal hierarchy and will reach to the parent. So that way there is a vertical arrow between them, and there is a prototype property which is a special hidden property on every object in double square brackets, and it will establish the relationship between these two objects. Cool. Now let's understand how we can use the F.prototype property. So first let's go through the definition. If F.prototype is an object, if there is an object to which F.prototype is pointing to, then the new operator which we usually use on the constructor function for creating the object, then the new operator uses it to set the prototype for the new object, right? So let's break it into the parts. So here mammal.prototype, as we discussed, mammal is the name of the function here. Say we have a constructor function named mammal. So mammal is the constructor function, and we discussed in the previous slide that every function has a regular property named prototype, which can be either null or which points to the another object. So here we are pointing the prototype property of this function to the another object, which is animal. Make sense? So here we set up the prototype property to point to animal. Now let's create a new object of mammal. So what we do is new mammal, and we pass the required parameter, and it returned us a new object. So we created a new object named dog. So when we created this object using new keyword, so what JavaScript internally will do is, it sees that we are using the constructor function, the new keyword is here. So when the object will be created, so when this dog is created, it will set its prototypal chain to point to the animal, right? So here when we are doing this mammal.prototype is equal to animal, so there is a horizontal relationship. So this is a mammal constructor function, and there is a animal object, so the prototype is pointing to the animal. So there is a horizontal relationship with this line, with this single line there is a horizontal relationship. And when we are executing the next line, that means we are creating a new object named dog, then the new keyword, what it will do is it will set up the relationship between these two as well. That means it will set up the prototypal chain between these two objects. This dog will inherit from animal, or this dog will inherit all the properties of animal. So the new keyword, what it will do is the object which is just created, it will point it to the prototype of the constructor function. So whatever is the prototype of this constructor function, it will point the object, or it will set up the vertical relationship for that newly created object to the prototype of that constructor function. I hope this makes sense. Let me reiterate the definition. If F.prototype is an object which is animal, then the new operator uses it. The new operator will use animal to set the prototype for the new object, So here dog will inherit all the properties from the animal. I hope this makes sense. Now let's jump into the code to see how we can actually use it, or how does it actually work. Let's code. So as part of the coding environment, I have the same HTML file. So I have commented the proto file which we created in the last session. Now we have the F.prototype file where we will code all the practices examples for today's session. So as part of setup, I have these two code samples ready. So I have an animal object which has properties as eats true and greet function which says hello world, and we have a constructor function mammal which takes name as a parameter, right? And this dot name is equal to name. So now first let's create the object. Say const dog is equal to new mammal dog. Or before that, let's first just console log it to see the default properties or the default prototype of the constructor function. So here we have a mammal, or not, actually we can do this only, dog console.log. We can do this only. So here let's see mammal.prototype. We discussed that prototype already exists in every function. So here we have a mammal, right? And mammal has a, by default, as I started typing prototype, so it automatically filled it, which means prototype already exists, right? And it has a just one property as we discussed in our slide, which is constructor, right? Which is constructor, and this is pointing back to the function itself, which is a mammal. So that definition holds true that every function by default has a prototype property, and it points to the object which has just a one single property constructor which points to the function itself. So that understanding is clear. Now let's create a new object dog. Let's see what is in the dog there. Console.log dog. So we will console log the dog. So dog has just a one property name, right? And it is pointing to the default prototype of the function, and the default prototype of the function was just a constructor which was pointing to its function name only. So that is what we are getting here. So the property of the newly created object is the name itself, and we discussed that the new keyword will set up a vertical relationship, means the prototypal chain to the prototype of mammal, and at this stage the prototype of mammal is the default object which has just a single property. So that is why we can see just a single property constructor, and which points to the function back. Now if I try to use this method greet, of animal, I cannot use that. It will throw an error that greet does not exist, or dog.greet is not a function. How I can use that method? How I can use greet, or I can access the its property here to do that? What I can do is mammal. I can change the prototype of mammal to point to the animal. So here what I am doing is I am changing the prototype of mammal function, mammal constructor function. So what will happen now is when we are creating the object, the new keyword, what it will do is it will create the object of mammal constructor, which is dog, and it will set up the vertical relationship or the prototypal chain for the dog to point it to the prototype of mammal, and the prototype of mammal is animal. So dog will point to the animal as its parent, or dog will inherit from animal. Now let's see if our code is working. Yes, it says no, it is saying undefined here. Why so? Let me debug this. Dog dot eats. Yes, eats is true. We are getting eats as true. But what if I try to greet? It says undefined. Okay, because we are in the console log inside. We are inside the console log only. Yes, it says hello world. Maybe I can do 1 2 3. Yes, hello world 1 2 3. So we are able to execute the method greet from the dog itself, because dog is inheriting from the animal, and dog is able to use the properties which are defined in animal. And I can do console.log as dog.eats as well. So whatever properties are available in the hierarchy or in the prototypal chain for the dog will be able to access all those properties, right? So here when we are doing this, when we are creating this new object, and if we want to compare it with the last session, with the __ proto session, this literally means that what I am doing internally is dog dot __ proto _ is equal to animal, right? This line literally means the dog object, its __ proto property is equal to animal, which is a getter setter for the prototype in double square brackets, right? So now let's understand why this method exists, why constructor function helps in creating the prototypal chain. Because as we discussed in the last session, the __ proto property as defined in the ECMAScript standards is not the standard property to set the prototypal chain. It does exist in the browser environments, because when the ECMAScript standards stated the prototypal inheritance as a language feature to implement the inheritance, but there was no standard way. So this constructor function comes to the language as a first standard way to create the prototypal inheritance. So that is why you can see this in practice today as well in most the languages, most the libraries, sorry. For example, if you heard of prototype.js, the times when there was a jQuery, then it has a competitor prototype.js. So this pattern was used there to create the prototypal chain in JavaScript, right? So this is how we can achieve the prototypal inheritance in JavaScript using the constructor functions. Now let's do some experiments with the default constructor property of the mammal. So for that, what I will do is I will remove, or I will move this a bit up, and I will comment this for now. I just want the constructor function. and this also. We are not setting it to any other object. We want the default prototype of the constructor function. Now let's create a new object, dog with new mammal, right? And here let's see mammal dot prototype, which is a constructor function itself, right? And we can see mammal dot constructor is equal to mammal. It says false. Yes, it will be false only because constructor is not a property on mammal. Mammal has a prototype property which points to the another object, right? Which points to the another object, and that has a constructor property, right, which is mammal itself, and I can verify that it is a mammal only by comparing it to the mammal function itself. So both are the same functions only. So mammal and mammal dot prototype dot constructor are actually the same functions. And dog is our object. Dog is our object which is created from the mammal only, right? So I can do console.log dog. So dog is our object which is created from the mammal. So here let me give the name as well, dog. And it has in its prototypal hierarchy, it has a constructor function. So I can say dog dot constructor is equal to mammal, right? This will also be true. So that means I can create new object, const dog2 is equal to new dog dot constructor dog2, and I can, if I print, it will also be the object of, sorry, let me give it a name, cat, cat. Yes, so we have successfully created the object cat, right? And this is also the member or the object of the mammal only, but here we have not used mammal, rather we have used the object which was created from mammal, and here we have used the property constructor, and we have initialized the object of the same constructor class. So basically dog dot constructor points to the same constructor function with which it was created. Now let's discuss why we did this change, and for that let me reset up the prototypal inheritance from the animal only, and for that I will enable this, and I will enable the inheritance from animal. Basically I will set the prototype of the constructor function to animal, right? And now everything is same. We are creating the object dog from mammal, and next I am using the dog dot constructor, basically the constructor property of the dog object which was earlier pointing to mammal itself. Now let's see what happens to that. I save this file and this got changed. Earlier it was the object of mammal only, but now it is pointing to string. What happened here? Why it suddenly got changed? Let's understand what is happening behind the scenes. So when I change the prototype of the mammal, now it is pointing to the animal, and animal has these two properties only, eats and greet. It doesn't have any property named constructor which was earlier pointing to the constructor function itself. So let's see this in practice as well. So now it does not have any property named constructor which was earlier pointing to the mammal itself. So that is why this syntax got broken. That is why you don't see it in practice in real life, right? So here what is happening is, when we are doing this dog dot constructor, it is basically going further in the prototypal hierarchy, and it is finding this constructor, and basically it is doing object. So when I'm doing this, it literally means what we are doing is new object. It literally means this, that we are creating a new object with this syntax. So the point here is, whenever you are assigning prototype to the constructor function, don't do the assignment operator, because intentionally or unintentionally you break the constructor of that constructor function. That constructor property no longer exists in the prototype of that constructor function. So JavaScript says, though the constructor property exists in the default prototype, but what happens with it if you overwrite it, that's all your responsibility. JavaScript does not throw any error for it, right? Because JavaScript says whatever is in the prototype, I will set it as a prototypal hierarchy for all the newly created objects. So what we should do to fix this problem? So the problem here is, we are assigning a new object to the prototype, and that doesn't have the reference to the original constructor property which was there earlier. So to fix that problem, what JavaScript says is, don't ever do the assignment to the prototype property, rather keep on adding properties to the prototype. So it says add new properties here. So it says eats is equal to true, right? Or maybe animal dot eats, and here greet. I extend the prototype property to add whatever I need from the animal, and I commented this. As soon as I commented and saved, so my mammal is back. Now my cat is an object of the mammal. So that is how you should actually play with the prototype. Don't ever assign to the prototype, because that will break the internal constructor property, and you never know where your code is gonna used down the line in the project lifetime, right? So this is the correct way to use the function prototype property. Cool, makes sense. And there is one more way. If I want to use the assignment, then I can do one more thing. I can define the property constructor here. Literally the property name is constructor, and then I can point it back to the mammal, and that way it will still continue to work. And if I uncomment it, this is not mammal's object, and if I uncomment that, and this is literally the object of the mammal. So this is how we can fix the problem which was there in our code. Make sense? And there is one more concept here. If I do this, if I do change the prototype after the object creation, then my code will continue to work fine, because JavaScript says when the object is created at that particular moment, what was the prototype of any constructor function, your all the created objects will continue to point to that object only, and any objects which will be created post the assignment, they will have the reference to the last prototype reference. So here dog2 will not have reference to the original prototype. So let me do this only, dog2 and dog2. For the timing, I will remove this cat. Now compare both objects. So dog is object of mammal and dog2 is also object of mammal, but its prototype is pointing to the original constructor function, original prototype of the constructor function, which is the constructor, and pointing back to the name itself. But here the prototype is pointing to the animal. So if we do some changes to the prototype, then the object which was created before that will remain the same, their prototype will remain the same, and the objects which are created post the assignment, they will have a reference to the newer prototype. So that was about the prototype method for creating the new objects and setting up the prototypal hierarchy. I hope you got the context here, like how we can use the F.prototype to set up the prototypal hierarchy or to set up the prototypal inheritance in JavaScript. Now let's move next and practice some of the challenges here. So problem statement 1, we have a constructor function rabbit and we are changing the prototype altogether, right? So here we are changing the prototype altogether. Rabbit.prototype is pointing to or is an object with one property, it's true. Here we are creating the object rabbit, right? And here rabbit.prototype, we are again changing back to blank object. Now what will be the value of this rabbit.eat? So rabbit.eat will be true because when an object is created, at that moment what was the value of prototype, it keep a reference to that object only. And if later in the code I change the prototype, it doesn't matter altogether. This will take effect for only for the object which will be created after this statement or after this line only. Any object which got created before this line will keep their reference to older prototype objects only. So when we are doing rabbit.it, it's referring to this object only, not this object. So this will log true only, and that we can check as well. So I will copy this and go back here, clear this and refresh. Yes, so it says true. I hope this makes sense. Let's move to the next example. So similar, we are creating a new rabbit object, and here what we are doing is rabbit.prototype.eats is equal to false. So we are setting the eats property to the false on the prototype itself. So what it should alert? I guess it will be false only because we are making it false on the prototype object itself. So let's verify our understanding here as well. Go back to the browser, clear it. Oh, sorry, spelling mistakes. Yes, it is false because what we are doing is we are setting the eats to false on the rabbit prototype itself. Next, problem statement 3. So same code, we are creating a new object from the rabbit, but this time we are deleting the eats from the rabbit. So what it should alert? In the last session we discussed that write and delete operation happens on the object itself or the child object itself. It does not impact the prototypal chain or the prototypal hierarchy. So here when we are doing rabbit.eats, it literally deleting the eats property on the rabbit itself. And here when we are trying to read the property eats from the rabbit, it doesn't find the eats from on the rabbit itself. So that is why it will follow the prototypal hierarchy, and when it follows the prototypal hierarchy, it will find the eats in its prototypal chain. So I think it will be true only. The output will be true only. Let's verify that. Yes, it is true because when we are deleting this, it is not impacting the prototypal hierarchy. It is just impacting the child itself. So when we are reading, at the read time, JavaScript reads it from the prototypal hierarchy. Makes sense? Let's move next to our last challenge, which is same like rabbit. We are creating the rabbit object from the rabbit constructor function. Now what we are doing is delete rabbit.prototype.eats. This time we are deleting the property from the prototypal hierarchy or from the prototype object. So it will get deleted, and because it is deleted, when we are trying to read it, JavaScript will not find in the object itself, and JavaScript will not find in the prototypal hierarchy as well. So it should return undefined. Let's verify that. Yes, it is undefined. So I hope you got the solution to this challenge as well. And today's session was helpful for you to understand the prototypal hierarchy or the prototypal chain using the constructor function. So constructor functions, or to say functions, has a special property named prototype which has special powers with it, right? So to just remember that this constructor function was the first official way in the JavaScript to create the prototypal inheritance from, or to set up the inheritance or the prototypal chain in JavaScript. That is why you see it in action in most of the code bases. You will see that prototypal chain is being used using the constructor functions only. So I hope today's session was helpful. It helps to build some understanding about the constructor functions and about the prototypal inheritance in JavaScript. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Bye bye.